Thanks for the entertainment. His up. Thanks for the entertainment. His hand trembled as he stared at the screen, $50 in cash sitting on the white tablecloth beside his water glass. Everything he could spare after paying bills and buying groceries for his daughter. Around him, couples laughed over wine and pasta, completely unaware that his chest was caving in with humiliation. He'd ironed his only good shirt for this. He'd asked his neighbor to watch 7-year-old Maya so he could take one fragile step toward something that felt like hope again. And now he was the punchline to a joke he didn't even know he was part of. If you want to see how one of the worst nights of a man's life became the beginning of everything he never knew he needed, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Ethan sat frozen in his chair, his phone still clutched in his hand, the cruel words burning into his retinas. He should have known better. He'd told himself that 100 times since his wife died 3 years ago. Don't hope too much, don't expect too much. Don't open yourself up to the kind of pain that comes when the world reminds you exactly how small you are. But loneliness has a way of making fools of cautious men. The restaurant hummed with life around him. Silverware clinked against porcelain. Wine glasses caught the amber glow of Edison bulbs hanging from exposed brick walls. A couple 2 tables over leaned close, whispering and smiling like they shared a language no one else could speak. Ethan felt the weight of every happy voice pressing down on him, making the emptiness at his own table unbearable. He glanced toward the door, calculating how quickly he could stand, walk out, and disappear into the November cold without drawing attention to himself. His server, a young woman with kind eyes and an undercut, was approaching with a basket of bread. He'd have to wave her off, leave a tip he couldn't really afford just to avoid looking cheap, and then vanish before anyone noticed the guy eating alone wasn't waiting for someone after all. Before he could move, a voice cut through his spiral. "Excuse me, are you waiting for someone?" Ethan's head snapped up. Standing beside his table was a woman in her late 30s, dressed in a charcoal blazer over a silk blouse, dark jeans that looked effortlessly expensive, and leather boots that had seen a few cities. Her hair was pulled back in a loose twist, a few strands escaping to frame a face that carried both confidence and something harder to name. Maybe curiosity, maybe concern. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, but not unkind. Ethan started, then stopped. His throat felt thick. Not anymore. She tilted her head slightly, and for a terrible moment he thought she might pity him. But instead she nodded once, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. "Good," she said, "because I just watched you read a text message that made you look like you wanted to crawl under the table, and I'm guessing whoever sent it doesn't deserve a second of your time." Ethan blinked. "You were watching me?" "I was sitting over there." She gestured toward a small corner table near the window. "And I saw you walk in 20 minutes ago looking nervous. Then I saw you check your phone every 2 minutes. Then I saw your face when you finally got the message you were waiting for." She paused. "I've been on the receiving end of cruel behavior before. I know what it looks like." He didn't know what to say. The humiliation that had been quietly suffocating him suddenly felt exposed, laid bare in front of a stranger who had no reason to care. "I'm Adrienne," she said, extending her hand. He shook it automatically. "Ethan." "So, here's my offer, Ethan," Adrienne said, her tone businesslike but warm. "I'm eating alone tonight because I just spent 8 hours in a contract negotiation, and I don't feel like going back to an empty hotel room. You're eating alone tonight because someone played a shitty joke on you. We're both here. We both need to eat. So why don't we do it together and salvage something from what was clearly shaping up to be a garbage evening?" Ethan stared at her, caught off guard by her directness. "You don't even know me." "True. But I know you showed up. I know you got dressed and left your house and tried. That tells me more than most first dates ever would." Something in her voice, steady, grounded, real, cut through the shame swirling in his chest. He glanced down at the $50 still sitting beside his water glass, then back up at her face. "I can't afford anything fancy," he said quietly. Adrienne's expression softened. "Then it's a good thing I'm buying." "No, not up for debate," she interrupted, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down before he could protest further. "I'm a corporate consultant. I bill $200 an hour, and I just closed a deal that's going to pay for my next 3 vacations. You're doing me a favor by keeping me company." She signaled the server. Besides, you look like you could use a drink. Ethan felt his resistance crumble. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that he hadn't had a real conversation with another adult in weeks. Maybe it was just the sheer audacity of this woman deciding he was worth her time when someone else had just decided he wasn't. Okay, he said. Okay, Adrienne echoed, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The server arrived and Adrienne ordered a bottle of red wine and 2 plates of the evening special without consulting the menu. When the server left, she turned her full attention to Ethan. So, she said, leaning back in her chair, tell me about the person who stood you up. Ethan winced. I'd rather not. Fair. Then tell me something else. Anything. He hesitated, then surprised himself by answering. I have a daughter, Maya. She's 7. Yeah? Adrienne's eyes brightened. What's she like? She's... Ethan paused, searching for the right words. She's everything. Smart, funny, stubborn as hell. She asks a million questions and never accepts because I said so as an answer. She wants to be a marine biologist, even though we live in Boston, and the closest ocean life she's seen is the lobster tank at the grocery store. Adrienne laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to fill the space between them. She sounds amazing. She is. Ethan's voice softened. She's the reason I keep going. There was a beat of silence, and he realized how much he'd just revealed. He braced himself for the usual responses. Pity, awkwardness, the subtle shift in someone's posture that said they didn't know how to handle the weight of single parenthood and loss. But Adrienne just nodded. That makes sense. What does? Why you're here tonight, she said. You're not here because you're desperate or lonely. Well, maybe a little lonely, but who isn't? You're here because you're trying to build a life that has room for more than just surviving. That takes guts. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. You got all that from watching me sit alone for 20 minutes? I'm good at reading people, Adrienne said. It's kind of my job. The wine arrived, and she poured them each a glass. Ethan took a sip and felt the warmth spread through him, loosening the knot of tension that had been sitting between his shoulders since he walked through the door. What about you? He asked. Why are you really eating alone tonight? Adrienne swirled her wine, considering the question. Honestly, because I spend most of my time managing other people's expectations, solving other people's problems, and making sure everyone else gets what they need. And sometimes I just want to sit in a quiet restaurant and not have to be on. But now you're having dinner with a stranger. True, she admitted, but you don't feel like work. You feel like... She paused, searching for the word. A person. Ethan smiled despite himself. As opposed to what? As opposed to a client, a colleague, a networking opportunity, or someone trying to get something from me. She met his eyes. You're just a guy who got dealt a bad hand tonight and decided to stay anyway. I was about to leave when you walked over. But you didn't. No, Ethan said slowly. I didn't. Their food arrived. Pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables and a lemon butter sauce that smelled like something Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd tasted. He picked up his fork and took a bite, and for a moment he forgot about the text message, the humiliation, the $50 that was supposed to cover a meal he'd been too nervous to eat. This is incredible, he said. Right? Adrienne grinned. I found this place 6 months ago, and I've been coming back ever since. The chef used to work at some Michelin-starred spot in New York, but got tired of the pressure and opened this little neighborhood joint instead. Best decision he ever made. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't demand conversation but didn't feel empty either. Ethan watched Adrienne as she ate, confident, self-possessed, completely at ease in a way he couldn't remember ever feeling. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing, he said quickly. I'm just... Thank you. For this. You didn't have to do it. I know, Adrienne said, but I wanted to. Why? She set down her fork and looked at him seriously. Because a long time ago I was sitting in a different restaurant in a different city, and I'd just been fired from a job I loved for refusing to cover up someone else's mistake. I was furious and humiliated and convinced my career was over. And a stranger bought me a cup of coffee and told me that the people who punish you for doing the right thing are never the people worth working for. She paused. I never forgot that. So when I saw you tonight, I thought, maybe I can be that person for someone else. Ethan didn't know what to say. The kindness in her words felt almost too much to hold. Did you ever see that person again? He asked. The one who bought you coffee? No, Adrienne said, but I've spent the last 10 years trying to pay it forward. They talked through the rest of dinner, about Boston, about the impossibility of finding decent parking, about Adrienne's work restructuring failing companies, and Ethan's job as a patient transporter at a hospital. He told her about the long shifts, the physical toll of moving patients from rooms to operating tables and back again, the way some nurses treated him like furniture and others like family. It's not what I planned to do with my life, Ethan admitted. But after my wife died, I needed something stable, something with benefits and a predictable schedule so I could be there for Maya. What did you want to do? Adrienne asked. Ethan hesitated. I wanted to be a physician assistant. I was halfway through a program when he stopped, the memory rising like a wave. When everything fell apart, I dropped out to take care of my wife during her treatment, and after she died, I couldn't afford to go back. So I took the transporter job and just stayed. Do you ever think about finishing? All the time, Ethan said quietly, but it's not realistic. Programs like that cost money I don't have, and I can't risk Maya's stability on something that might not work out. Adrienne leaned forward, her gaze intense. What if it did work out? Then I'd be a different person living a different life. Maybe, she said, or maybe you'd be the same person finally living the life you were supposed to have. Ethan felt the words settle somewhere deep. He wanted to argue, to explain all the reasons why hope was dangerous and dreams were luxuries he couldn't afford. But sitting across from this woman who had pulled him out of the wreckage of his evening and handed him something that felt like possibility, he couldn't quite make himself say it. The server returned to clear their plates and offer dessert. Adrienne ordered tiramisu and 2 forks without asking, and when it arrived, they shared it in easy silence, the rich espresso-soaked layers melting on Ethan's tongue like a small, sweet rebellion against every hard thing he'd endured. When the check came, Adrienne handed over her card before Ethan could even reach for his wallet. I told you, she said. My treat. I owe you, Ethan said. You don't owe me anything. Adrienne signed the receipt and stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. But if you want to keep talking, I wouldn't mind grabbing coffee sometime. Ethan stood too, surprised by how much he didn't want the night to end. Yeah, I'd like that. Good. She pulled out her phone and handed it to him. Put your number in. He typed it in and handed the phone back. A moment later, his own phone buzzed. This is Adrienne. Text me when you get home so I know you didn't get mugged on the way to the tea. He smiled. I will. They walked out into the November cold together, breath misting in the air. Adrienne's car, a sleek black Audi, was parked half a block away. Ethan's subway station was in the opposite direction. This was unexpected, Ethan said. The best things usually are, Adrienne replied. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder once, a brief gesture that somehow carried more weight than words. Then she turned and walked toward her car, heels clicking against the pavement. Ethan stood on the sidewalk and watched her go, the ghost of humiliation finally lifting from his chest. He pulled out his phone and looked at the text message one more time, the one that had sent him spiraling an hour ago. Then he deleted it. He started walking toward the subway, hands shoved in his pockets, the cold biting at his face. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't feel small. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan and Adrienne fell into an easy rhythm. They texted throughout the day, short messages at first, then longer conversations that stretched into the evening. She sent him photos of terrible airport coffee and brutally boring conference rooms. He sent her pictures of Maya's latest art projects and the occasional chaotic ER waiting room. Their first coffee meeting happened on a Saturday morning at a place near Boston Common. Adrienne showed up in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, looking softer and more relaxed than she had at the restaurant. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, too nervous to be late. They talked for 2 hours. Adrienne told him about growing up in North Carolina, the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. She talked about putting herself through business school, about the relentless grind of proving herself in rooms full of men who assumed she was there to take notes. She talked about the loneliness of success, the the way climbing higher sometimes meant leaving people behind. Ethan told her about meeting his wife in college, about the whirlwind of falling in love at 22 and thinking they had forever. He told her about the diagnosis, the treatments, the slow erosion of hope. He told her about the morning he woke up beside her and knew she was gone, and the way Maya had crawled into bed with him and asked when Mommy was coming home. "I didn't know how to answer her," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I still don't, sometimes." Adrian reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "You're doing better than you think." "How do you know?" "Because your daughter sounds happy, and kids don't fake that." Ethan blinked hard, fighting the burn behind his eyes. "Thank you." They met again the following week. Then again. Coffee turned into walks along the esplanade, past runners and dog walkers and couples holding hands. Adrienne talked about her latest project, a struggling manufacturing company hemorrhaging money and morale. Ethan talked about a patient he'd transported that week, a man in his 80s who told jokes the whole way to surgery and made Ethan laugh despite the weight of the moment. "You care about people," Adrienne observed. "Really care? That's rare." "I just do my job." "No," she said firmly. "You see people. That's different." One evening in early December, Adrienne invited Ethan to a gallery opening in the South End. He almost said no. Art galleries felt like spaces he didn't belong in, places where people spoke a language he'd never learned. But Adrienne insisted. "You'll hate it," she said cheerfully. "But I'll buy you dinner after and we can make fun of all the pretentious people who paid $3,000 for a painting of a single blue line." So he went. The gallery was exactly as pretentious as promised. White walls, abstract sculptures, wine served in tiny glasses. Ethan felt out of place in his thrift store blazer and scuffed shoes. But Adrienne stayed close, her hand occasionally brushing his arm as she pointed out particularly absurd pieces and whispered commentary that made him bite back laughter. "That one's called Existential Geometry Number 7, she murmured, nodding toward a canvas covered in random triangles. "I'm pretty sure my niece made the same thing in kindergarten." Ethan snorted, earning a glare from a woman in a fur stole. They escaped after an hour and found a dive bar 2 blocks away, the kind of place with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played songs from the 70s. Adrienne ordered whiskey. Ethan ordered a beer. They sat in a corner booth and talked until the bartender started wiping down tables. "I like this," Adrienne said at one point, her words slightly loose from the whiskey. "What?" "This. You. The fact that you're not trying to impress me." "I don't know how to impress you," Ethan admitted. "Exactly." She smiled. "It's refreshing." He didn't tell her that he was terrified of disappointing her, that every time they met, he half expected her to realize he was just a guy barely keeping his head above water, nothing special, nothing worth her time. He didn't tell her that he went home after every conversation and replayed her words in his head, looking for proof that she saw something in him he couldn't see in himself. Instead, he smiled back and said, "I'm glad you think so." In mid-December, Adrienne met Maya. It wasn't planned. Ethan's neighbor, the retired school teacher who usually watched Maya when he worked late, called in sick, and Ethan was in a bind. He texted Adrienne to cancel their plans, explaining the situation. Her response came immediately. "Bring her." "Are you sure?" "Positive. I want to meet the marine biologist." So Ethan showed up at the coffee shop with Maya in tow, her backpack covered in dolphin stickers, her curls pulled into 2 lopsided pigtails. She looked up at Adrienne with wide, curious eyes. "You're the lady my dad keeps texting," Maya announced. Adrienne laughed. "Guilty, and you're the scientist." Maya beamed. "I'm going to discover a new species of jellyfish." "That's a solid plan," Adrienne said seriously. "What are you going to name it?" "I don't know yet. I have to find it first." They spent the afternoon at the New England Aquarium. Adrienne bought the tickets before Ethan could protest, and Maya dragged them both from exhibit to exhibit, rattling off facts about sea turtles and coral reefs and the hunting patterns of octopuses. Adrienne listened with genuine interest, asking questions and crouching down to Maya's level to peer into tanks. At one point, Maya grabbed Adrienne's hand and pulled her toward the touch tank, and Ethan watched the two of them laugh as they petted a stingray, and something in his chest ached with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Later, as they walked back toward the parking garage, Maya slipped her hand into Adrienne's again. "You're nice," Maya said. You're pretty cool yourself, Adrian replied. Maya looked up at her father. Can she come over for dinner? Ethan froze, but Adrian just smiled. I'd like that. So she did. Ethan's apartment was small and cluttered. Toys scattered across the living room floor, dishes in the sink, a stack of medical textbooks gathering dust on the coffee table. He apologized as he let her in, but Adrienne waved him off. This is real life, she said. I like it. He made spaghetti, one of the 3 meals he could cook reliably, and Maya set the table with mismatched plates and cups. They ate together, Maya chattering about school and her best friend Emma and the hamster they were getting for Christmas. Adrienne asked questions and made jokes, and by the end of the meal, Maya was leaning against her shoulder like they'd known each other for years. After dinner, Maya fell asleep on the couch mid-movie, her head resting on Adrienne's lap. Ethan started to move her, but Adrienne shook her head. She's fine, she whispered. They sat in the dim glow of the television, the weight of Maya's small body warm between them, and Ethan realized something that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. He was falling for this woman, not because she was successful or confident or beautiful, though she was all those things, but because she saw him, she saw Maya, she saw the life they'd built from the wreckage of loss, and she didn't flinch. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. For what? For showing up. Adrienne looked at him, her eyes soft in the low light. You make it easy. Later, after she left, Ethan carried Maya to bed and tucked her in. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep, and felt the first fragile stirrings of something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The weeks that followed became a rhythm Ethan hadn't known he was capable of finding. His days at the hospital continued in their familiar monotony, transporting patients from pre-op to surgery, from recovery rooms back to their floors, his shoulders aching by the end of each shift. But now his phone buzzed with messages that made him smile. Photos of terrible conference room sandwiches, questions about Maya's science project, links to articles about physician assistant programs with notes that said, just in case you're curious. He tried not to read too much into it, tried not to let himself believe that someone like Adrian Cole, sharp, successful, moving through the world with the kind of confidence he'd forgotten how to access, could actually want someone like him. But every time they met, every conversation that stretched longer than the last, every moment she spent with Maya like it was the most natural thing in the world, his defenses crumbled a little more. It was mid-January when everything shifted. Ethan was leaving the hospital after a double shift, his body exhausted, his mind already planning the next day's logistics. Maya had a dentist appointment at 3. He needed to pick up groceries. The rent was due in 5 days, and he was $70 short, which meant another conversation with his landlord about paying late again. His phone rang as he stepped into the cold. Adrienne's name lit up the screen. Hey, he answered, trying to sound less tired than he felt. Where are you? Her voice was tight, urgent. Just leaving work. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm outside your building. Can you come home now? Ethan's stomach dropped. Is Maya okay? Maya's fine. She's with your neighbor. Just please come home. He caught the next train, his mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened to his apartment? Had his landlord finally decided a struggling single father wasn't worth the hassle? Had Adrienne realized she'd made a mistake and come to end things in person because she was too kind to do it over text? When he arrived, Adrienne was sitting on the front steps of his building, her coat pulled tight against the January wind. She stood when she saw him, and he searched her face for clues. What's going on? He asked. She held out a folder. I need you to look at something. Ethan took it, his hands numb from cold and confusion. Inside were printed pages, applications, program requirements, financial aid information, all of it for physician assistant programs in the Boston area. Adrienne? Just listen, she interrupted. I've been doing research. There are 3 programs within commuting distance. 2 of them have evening and weekend options specifically designed for working parents. The application deadline for the fall semester is March 15th. Ethan stared at the papers, his chest tightening. I can't afford this. There's financial aid, grants for non-traditional students, loan programs with income-based repayment. She flipped to a highlighted page. And this one offers a stipend for students who commit to working in underserved communities after graduation. Adrienne, I can't. Yes, You can. Her voice was fierce now, brooking no argument. You're already doing the work. You're already in the hospital every day, already learning, already helping people. The only difference is that right now you're doing it for $13 an hour with no benefits and no future. This would change everything. And what happens when I can't keep up? Ethan's voice rose despite himself. What happens when I'm trying to study and work and take care of Maya and something falls apart? What happens when I prove everyone right, that I'm just a guy who couldn't cut it the first time and won't cut it now? Adrienne stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. What happens if you don't try? What happens when Maya gets older and asks why you gave up on the thing you wanted most? What do you tell her then? The words hit like a fist to the sternum. Ethan looked away, blinking hard against the sting in his eyes. I'm scared, he said quietly. I know. Adrienne's voice softened. But you're also capable, and you're not doing this alone. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. She reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his frozen skin. I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. I'm here, and I'm telling you that you can do this. He wanted to believe her, wanted it so badly it physically hurt. Why do you care so much? He asked. Adrienne was quiet for a moment, her breath misting in the cold air. Because when I look at you, I see someone who's spent 3 years making sure everyone else is okay while completely ignoring what he needs. And I think that's bullshit. I think you deserve more than surviving. I think you deserve a life that feels like it's yours. Ethan felt something crack open inside him. Some locked chamber he'd been protecting since the morning he buried his wife and promised himself he'd never be vulnerable again. He looked at Adrienne, at this woman who barely knew him but somehow saw straight through to the parts he'd been hiding, and made a choice that terrified him. Okay, he said. Okay? I'll apply. Adrienne's face broke into a smile so bright it made the January cold feel irrelevant. She threw her arms around him, and Ethan held on, breathing in the scent of her perfume and the impossible reality of someone believing in him this completely. You won't regret this, she said into his shoulder. I already regret it, Ethan replied, but he was smiling too. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat at his kitchen table and opened the folder. He read through the requirements, the application essays, the recommendation letter guidelines. His old advisor from the program he'd dropped out of might still remember him. One of the nurses at the hospital, Sandra, who always made sure he got lunch breaks, had told him once that he'd make a great PA. Maybe she'd write something. He pulled out a notebook and started drafting the personal statement. I'm applying to this program because I have spent the last 3 years watching people heal and people suffer, and I want to do more than bear witness. I want to be part of the solution. He crossed it out. Too formal. Too distant. I dropped out of a PA program when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. I thought I was making a temporary choice, but after she died, temporary became permanent, and I convinced myself that some doors close for good. Better. More honest. He wrote for 2 hours, deleting and rewriting, trying to capture the truth of what had brought him to this moment without sounding desperate or damaged. It was harder than he'd expected, translating loss and hope into words that would convince strangers he deserved a second chance. His phone buzzed, a text from Adrienne. How's it going? Slow, I don't know how to make myself sound like someone worth investing in. Her response came immediately. You're already worth investing in. Just tell them who you are. Ethan stared at the words, then looked back at his notebook. He picked up his pen and kept writing. Over the next 6 weeks, Ethan's life became a carefully orchestrated chaos. He worked his shifts at the hospital, picked Maya up from school, helped with homework, made dinner, and then stayed up until midnight working on applications. Adrienne texted him encouragement and brought him coffee on the weekends when she wasn't traveling for work. She proofread his essays, helped him prepare for the interview he'd need if he got called in, and never once made him feel like he was failing when he was too tired to meet her for dinner. You're doing great, she told him one Friday night when he apologized for canceling their plans again. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what growth looks like, Adrienne said. Nobody transforms their life while feeling calm and collected. He submitted his applications on March 10th, 5 days before the deadline. Then he waited. The weeks that followed were excruciating. Every time his phone rang, his stomach dropped. Every email notification made his pulse spike. He tried to focus on work, on Maya, on the daily tasks that kept his life running, but the waiting sat in his chest like a weight. Adrienne became his anchor. She didn't push him to talk about it when he didn't want to, but she was always there, texting funny stories from her business trips, sending Maya science kits and books about ocean life, showing up at Ethan's apartment with takeout when she knew he was too stressed to cook. "You don't have to keep doing this," Ethan said one evening as they sat on his couch while Maya built a Lego reef ecosystem on the floor. "Doing what?" "Taking care of me." Adrienne looked at him, her expression serious. "What if I want to?" "Why would you want to?" "Because you're someone worth taking care of." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "And because when I'm with you and Maya, I feel like I'm part of something real. Do you know how rare that is?" Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as a burden, to his neighbors, to his friends who'd drifted away after his wife died, to anyone who got close enough to see how much he was struggling. The idea that someone might actually want to be in his life, not out of obligation but out of choice, felt almost impossible to accept. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly, "and it scares the hell out of me." Adrienne smiled. "Good. I'm falling for you too." Maya looked up from her Legos. "Are you guys gonna kiss?" Adrienne laughed. "Would that be okay with you?" Maya considered this seriously. "Only if you're staying for movie night." "Deal," Adrienne said. She leaned over and kissed Ethan softly, and he felt the last of his resistance dissolve. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't facing the future alone. In mid-April, Ethan received an email from the admission committee of the program he wanted most. He stared at the subject line, application status update, for a full minute before opening it. "Dear Mr. Walker, we are pleased to invite you for an in-person interview." He read the email 3 times to make sure he understood. Then he called Adrienne. "They want to interview me," he said, his voice shaking. She screamed so loud he had to pull the phone away from his ear. I told you this would happen. It's just an interview. It doesn't mean..." "It means they see what I see," Adrienne interrupted. "It means you're exactly what they're looking for." "When is it?" "Next Wednesday at 2. I'm clearing my schedule. I'm coming with you." You don't have to..." "I'm coming," she said firmly. "You're not doing this alone." The interview was terrifying. 3 faculty members sat across from Ethan in a small conference room and asked him questions about his experience, his goals, his reasons for returning to school. He stumbled over some answers, felt too honest with others, and left convinced he'd blown his one chance. Adrienne was waiting in the parking lot. She took one look at his face and pulled him into a hug. "I messed up," he said into her shoulder. "You didn't. I told them I dropped out because I couldn't handle my wife dying." "Who says that in an interview?" "Someone who's honest about the hardest thing they've ever survived," Adrienne said. "That's not weakness, Ethan. That's courage." He wanted to believe her, but the doubt sat heavy in his chest as they drove back to the city. 2 weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived. Ethan was at work when he got the email notification. He read it on his phone in the hospital break room, surrounded by vending machines and flickering fluorescent lights, and felt his knees go weak. "Congratulations! We are delighted to offer you admission," he called Adrienne before he called anyone else. "I got in," he said, his voice breaking. She was crying before he finished the sentence. "I'm so proud of you." "I don't know how I'm going to do this." "Yes, you do," Adrienne said. "You're going to show up. You're going to work harder than you've ever worked. And you're going to prove to yourself what everyone else already knows, that you're extraordinary." That night, Ethan told Maya over dinner. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but she understood enough. "Does this mean you're going to be a real doctor?" she asked. "Not a doctor," Ethan explained. "A physician assistant. I'll help doctors take care of people." Maya grinned. "That's so cool." "It's going to be hard," Ethan warned. "I'll have to study a lot. I might not be home as much." "That's okay," Maya said. "You're doing something important." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "You're pretty wise for 7, you know that?" "I know," Maya said matter-of-factly, and Adrienne laughed so hard she nearly spilled her water. The summer before the program started was a strange, suspended kind of time. Ethan continued working at the hospital, saving every dollar he could for the expenses ahead. Adrienne helped him apply for grants and loans, navigating the financial aid labyrinth with the same focused intensity she brought to corporate negotiations. They spent weekends at the beach with Maya, building sandcastles and searching for shells, making memories before the chaos of school began. It was during one of those weekends, sitting on a blanket while Maya ran through the surf, that Adrienne told him about the offer. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice careful. Ethan looked at her, his stomach nodding. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I got a job offer, a big one." "That's great," Ethan said, meaning it. "What is it?" Adrienne took a breath. "A consulting firm in San Francisco wants me to lead a national restructuring project. It's a year-long contract, the kind of opportunity that could define the rest of my career." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. "San Francisco?" "Yeah." "For a year?" "Yeah." They sat in silence, watching Maya chase seagulls. Ethan tried to organize his thoughts, to push past the immediate panic and think clearly. "When do you have to decide?" he asked. 2 weeks. And you want to take it?" It wasn't a question. Adrienne met his eyes. "I don't know. Part of me does. It's everything I've worked toward. But the other part..." She stopped, her voice catching. "The other part doesn't want to leave you and Maya." Ethan reached for her hand. "You should take it." "Ethan, I'm serious," he said, even though the words felt like swallowing glass. "This is your dream. You can't turn it down because of me." "It's not just because of you," Adrienne said. "It's because what we're building matters to me, and I don't know how to do that from 3,000 miles away." "We'll figure it out." Ethan surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. "You've spent the last 6 months telling me I'm capable of more than I think. Now I'm telling you the same thing. You can have both." Adrienne's eyes filled. "You really believe that?" "I have to," Ethan said. "Because if you taught me anything, it's that the people who matter don't make you choose between your life and theirs. They make room for both." She kissed him then, salt air and sunscreen and the taste of something bittersweet. When they pulled apart, she was crying. "I love you," she said. It was the first time either of them had said it. Ethan felt the words land in his chest like an anchor, grounding him even as everything else felt uncertain. "I love you too," he said. Maya ran back to them, soaking wet and covered in sand. "What are you guys talking about?" "Adrienne got a new job," Ethan said. "Cool. Are we celebrating?" "Yeah," Adrienne said, wiping her eyes and pulling Maya into a hug. "We're celebrating." But as they packed up their things and headed back to the car, Ethan felt the weight of what was coming. A year apart. A year of late-night calls and visits that would never be enough. A year of Adrienne building her future while he tried to build his, both of them hoping the distance wouldn't break what they'd started. The next 2 weeks passed too quickly. Adrienne accepted the offer. Ethan started his program, the workload immediately more intense than anything he'd prepared for. They tried to see each other as much as possible, but between his classes and her preparations for the move, the time slipped away. The night before Adrienne left for San Francisco, they had dinner at the same restaurant where they'd first met. Ethan had asked his neighbor to watch Maya, wanting this last evening to be just the two of them. They sat at a different table this time, but the memories hung in the air between them, the humiliation that had brought Ethan here, the stranger who'd refused to let him leave broken. "Hard to believe it's only been 7 months, Adrienne said, looking around the room. "Feels like longer," Ethan admitted. "In a good way?" "In the best way." Their food arrived, but neither of them had much appetite. They talked about logistics, time zones, video call schedules, holidays when Adrienne might fly back. They talked about Ethan's program, the studying he'd need to do, the clinical rotations that would start in a few months. They talked about everything except the fact that tomorrow she'd be gone. Finally, over coffee, Adrienne reached across the table and took both of Ethan's hands. "I need you to promise me something," she said. "Anything. Promise me you won't give up. On school, on yourself, on us. Because this year is going to be hard, and there are going to be moments when it feels impossible. But I need you to keep going." Ethan squeezed her hands. "I promise. But you have to promise me something too." "What?" "Promise me you'll let yourself succeed out there. Don't hold back because you're worried about me. I want you to be extraordinary. Adrienne smiled through tears. Deal. They left the restaurant and walked through the city, hand in hand, neither wanting to say goodbye. Eventually, they ended up at Boston Common, sitting on a bench overlooking the pond. The September air was cool, the first whisper of fall creeping in. I'm going to miss you, Adrienne said. I'm going to miss you too. But we're going to make this work. Yeah, Ethan said. We are. They sat in silence, holding each other as the city moved around them. And when Adrienne finally stood to leave, Ethan stood with her, walking her to her car, kissing her one more time before she drove away. He watched her taillights disappear into the Boston night, his heart aching with loss and hope tangled together. Then he turned and walked home to Maya, to the textbooks waiting on his kitchen table, to the life he was building one impossible day at a time. The distance had begun, but so had everything else. The first month without Adrienne felt like learning to breathe underwater. Ethan would reach for his phone to text her something small. Maya's new obsession with origami, a patient who'd thanked him for remembering her name, and then remember the 3-hour time difference. When he finally could call, exhausted after evening classes, she'd be in meetings or on client sites, her voice distracted, pulled in directions he couldn't see. The program consumed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Anatomy, pharmacology, clinical medicine, the material came at him like a fire hose, relentless and unforgiving. He studied on the train to campus during lunch breaks at the hospital where he still worked part-time to cover expenses and late into the night after Maya fell asleep. His eyes burned. His back ached from hunching over textbooks. He survived on coffee and the stubborn refusal to prove right everyone who'd ever doubted him. Maya noticed the change. She was 8 now, old enough to see that her father was fraying at the edges. You look tired, she said one morning over cereal, her voice matter-of-fact but concerned. I'm okay, sweetheart. That's what you always say? She stirred her Lucky Charms, watching the milk turn rainbow-colored. Do you miss Adrienne? The question caught him off guard. Yeah, I do. Me too. She taught me how to make paper cranes. I know. But are you still boyfriend and girlfriend even though she's far away? Ethan set down his coffee. We're trying to be. What does that mean? It means we care about each other a lot, but it's hard when we can't see each other. Maya nodded seriously. Emma's dad lives in New York and she only sees him on weekends. She says it's sad, but you get used to it. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I guess you do. But getting used to it felt like surrender, and Ethan wasn't ready for that yet. So he and Adrienne fell into a rhythm held together by pixels and time zones. They video called twice a week, sometimes more if her schedule allowed. She'd walk him through San Francisco streets on her phone, showing him the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset, the sea lions at Fisherman's Wharf, the cramped studio apartment she'd rented in the Mission District. He'd show her his anatomy models, quiz her on bone structures, let Maya hijack the call to demonstrate her latest origami creation. I'm proud of you, Adrienne told him one night in October, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop screen. For what? For not giving up. I know this is hard. Hard doesn't cover it, Ethan admitted. He was sitting at his kitchen table surrounded by flashcards, a half-eaten sandwich forgotten beside his textbook. I failed my first pharmacology exam. Adrienne's expression shifted. How badly? 62%. Passing is 70. Okay, so you retake it. I can't retake it. That's not how this works. Ethan rubbed his eyes. I have to ace the next one just to bring my average up to passing. And if I don't, you will. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm, cutting through his spiral. Because you're not the same person who walked away from this program 3 years ago. You're stronger now. You know what's at stake, and you're not doing this alone. It feels pretty alone from here, Ethan said, and immediately regretted it. Adrienne's face fell. I know. I'm sorry I'm not there. That's not what I meant, but it's true. She looked away from the camera. I took this job knowing it would be hard. I just didn't realize how hard. They sat in uncomfortable silence, 3,000 miles feeling like 3 million. I don't want to fight, Ethan said finally. We're not fighting, we're just... Adrienne sighed. We're both exhausted and stretched too thin in trying to make something work that maybe shouldn't have to be this complicated. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to name. "Do you regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. "Taking the job?" Adrienne met his eyes through the screen. "No, but I regret the cost." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Me too." They talked for another hour, the conversation eventually finding its way back to safer ground. But after they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark kitchen and felt the distance like a physical ache. He loved her. He believed they could survive this. But belief didn't make the loneliness any easier to carry. November brought the first real crisis. Ethan's second pharmacology exam came back with a 74, passing, but barely. His clinical skills professor pulled him aside after class to express concern about his practical examination performance. He was forgetting basic assessment steps, mixing up protocols, his hands shaking from exhaustion and stress. "You're trying to do too much," Dr. Reeves said, her tone kind but firm. "You can't work 20 hours a week and carry a full course load and be a single parent. Something has to give." "I need the hospital job to pay rent," Ethan said. "Then you need to reconsider your course load, drop to part-time status. That would add another year to the program. Better than failing out completely." Ethan walked out of that meeting feeling hollowed out. He'd fought so hard to get here, sacrificed so much, and now he was being told he still wasn't enough. That evening, he missed Maya's school play rehearsal because he lost track of time studying in the library. When he finally picked her up, 45 minutes late, her teacher's expression a mixture of concern and judgment, Maya was quiet in the car. "I'm sorry, baby," Ethan said. "I messed up. Ms. Peterson had to wait with me. She missed her dinner." "I know. I'll apologize to her tomorrow." "You said you'd be there." The disappointment in her voice was worse than any failed exam. "You're right. I should have been there. I'm sorry." Maya stared out the window. "Are you going to keep forgetting things?" "I'm going to try really hard not to." "That's not the same as promising." No, Ethan thought. It wasn't. That night after Maya was asleep, he called Adrienne. She answered on the first ring, her voice foggy with sleep. It was past midnight in San Francisco. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Everything." The word came out broken. "I'm failing. Not just the program. I'm failing Maya. I'm failing at being the person you think I am. I can't do this." "Yes, you can." "Stop saying that." Ethan's voice rose, surprising himself. "Stop acting like you know what this is like. You're 3,000 miles away building your career while I'm drowning here, and I can't keep pretending this is sustainable." Adrienne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but strained. "What are you saying?" "I don't know." Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes. I need help, and you're not here, and I don't know how to do this anymore." "Then tell me what you need." "I need you here, but I can't ask you to give up your dream for mine." You're not asking. I'm offering." Adrienne sat up, suddenly more awake. "I can come home for a few weeks. I'll talk to my team, we'll figure it out." "No, don't do that." Ethan took a shaky breath. "I'm just tired. I'll be okay." "Ethan, I should go. I have an exam at 8. "Please don't hang up like this." But he did. He ended the call and sat in the dark, hating himself for pushing her away, hating the circumstances that had brought them here, hating the weakness that made him want to give up. His phone rang immediately. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Again. Finally a text. "I love you. We're going to get through this. Please call me back when you're ready." He didn't call back that night, or the next day. He threw himself into studying with manic intensity, as if perfect exam scores could somehow compensate for everything else falling apart. He passed his next round of tests. He showed up for Maya's next rehearsal 30 minutes early. He worked his hospital shifts and smiled at patients and pretended the exhaustion wasn't eating him alive from the inside out. 3 days after their fight, a package arrived at his apartment. Inside was a care package from Adrienne. Maya's favorite snacks, a new set of colored pencils, a stuffed otter wearing a tiny lab coat. For Ethan, there were energy bars, fancy coffee, and a note written in her precise handwriting. "You're not alone, even when it feels like you are. I'm right here. Always." He called her that night. "I'm sorry," he said when she answered. "I know. I shouldn't have shut you out." No, you shouldn't have, but I understand why you did. Adrian's voice was gentle. You're carrying too much, Ethan, and you're so used to carrying it alone that you don't know how to let people help. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're the person I love. There's a difference. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I love you too. I'm scared I'm going to fail. At school, at being a good father, at this relationship, and I don't know how to do any of it right. You're already doing it right, Adrian said. You're showing up. You're trying. That's all any of us can do. They talked until 2 in the morning, her time, working through the fear and frustration that had been building for months. Adrienne told him about her own struggles in San Francisco, the loneliness of hotel rooms and client dinners where everyone talked but nobody really connected. She told him about turning down drinks with colleagues because she'd rather video call him and Maya. She told him that success felt hollow when the people she cared about most were somewhere else. Maybe we're both trying too hard to do everything perfectly, she said. Maybe we need to accept that this year is just going to be messy and hard, and that's okay. When did you get so wise? Ethan asked. I've always been wise. You're just finally listening. He laughed, surprising himself. I miss you. I miss you too, but we're going to make it. 6 more months and I'll be back. 6 months felt like forever, but it also felt possible. December arrived with the kind of cold that sank into bones and stayed there. Ethan's second semester exams loomed and the program's intensity ratcheted up another notch. He was now doing clinical rotations 2 days a week at a family medicine practice, seeing real patients under supervision, translating classroom theory into actual human care. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. One afternoon in mid-December, he was taking a patient history, a woman in her 50s with chronic back pain, when she looked at him with tired eyes and said, "You actually listen. Most of them just type into their computers and don't even look at me." The comment stayed with him. That night, studying diagnostic criteria for musculoskeletal disorders, he realized something had shifted. He wasn't just memorizing information anymore. He was learning how to see people, how to hear what they weren't saying, how to bridge the gap between medical knowledge and human suffering. The work was still crushing, but it was starting to mean something. He told Adrienne about it during their next call. You sound different, she observed. Different how? Less defeated. More like yourself. I think I'm finally figuring out what I'm doing, Ethan admitted. It's still hard as hell, but I can see why it matters now. That's because you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Christmas came and Adrienne couldn't make it home. Her project was in a critical phase, and the client needed her on site through the holidays. She sent elaborate gifts for Maya and a video message of herself in a Santa hat, promising to make it up to them. Maya tried to hide her disappointment, but Ethan saw it in the way she hugged the stuffed otter a little tighter that night. Is Adrienne still your girlfriend? Maya asked on Christmas morning as they opened presents. Yes. But she's never here anymore. I know, but she still cares about us. Then why doesn't she come home? Ethan didn't have a good answer. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices about work and the people they love. Adrienne is doing really important things in San Francisco. More important than us. The question was a knife between the ribs. No, sweetheart. Not more important. Just different. Maya nodded, but Ethan could tell she didn't really understand. Hell, he barely understood it himself. New Year's came and went. January bled into February, each day a blur of lectures and clinicals and late-night study sessions. Ethan's grades stabilized. He passed his practical examinations with solid scores. His supervising physician at the family practice started giving him more autonomy, trusting him to conduct initial assessments and develop treatment plans. Small victories, but they added up. In early March, Adrienne called with news that made Ethan's stomach drop. They want to extend my contract, she said. Another 6 months. Maybe longer. What? The project is going so well that they want me to lead the implementation phase. It would mean staying in San Francisco through the end of the year at least. Ethan sat down, the weight of the words crushing him. That's more than a year total. I know. What did you tell them? I haven't told them anything yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Adrienne's voice was careful, controlled. This could be huge for my career, Ethan, the kind of project that defines what comes next, but I also know what it costs. Do you want to stay? Silence. Then quietly, part of me does. Ethan closed his eyes. Then you should stay. Don't do that. Don't just tell me what you think I want to hear. I'm not. He took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that felt like broken glass. I'm telling you that I can't ask you to give up something this important, not after you pushed me to go after my own dreams. But what about us? I don't know, Ethan admitted. I honestly don't know how we keep doing this for another year. So what? We just give up? After everything? I'm not saying that. But even as he spoke, Ethan felt the foundation shifting beneath them. I'm saying we have to be realistic. You're building something incredible out there. I'm trying to survive here, and we're both so focused on our own paths that there's barely any room left for this. There's always room if we make it. Is there? Ethan's voice cracked. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're just delaying the inevitable, like we're holding on to something that worked when we were in the same city, but doesn't work across 3,000 miles. Don't say that. Adrienne, no. Don't give up on us because it's hard. We've survived hard before. This is different, and you know it. They argued for another hour, talking in circles, neither willing to concede, but neither able to find a solution that didn't require one of them to sacrifice everything they'd been working toward. Finally, exhausted and emotionally wrung out, they agreed to think about it and talk again in a few days. But a few days became a week. A week became 2. Their calls grew shorter, more stilted, filled with the things they weren't saying. Ethan threw himself into his rotations with renewed intensity, as if perfect patient care could fill the hole opening in his chest. Adrienne stopped texting as frequently, and when she did, her messages felt polite, distant, the kind of communication between colleagues, not lovers. Maya noticed. Did you and Adrienne break up? She asked one evening while they folded laundry. Ethan's hand stilled on a towel. Why would you think that? Because you don't smile when she calls anymore, and she hasn't sent me anything in a while. We're just figuring some things out. That's what Emma's parents said before they got divorced. We're not married, Maya. But you love her. You told me you did. I do love her. Ethan sat down, pulling his daughter close. But sometimes love isn't enough to make hard situations work. Sometimes people need different things, and there's no way to make everyone happy. That's stupid. Yeah, Ethan agreed. It really is. In late March, Adrienne called unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was between classes, sitting in his car in the parking lot, trying to grab 20 minutes of rest before his next clinical shift. Hey, he answered, surprised. I need to tell you something. Her voice was tight, controlled. I accepted the extension. Ethan felt something inside him go still. Okay. I thought about what you said about being realistic, and you're right, we can't keep doing this. It's not fair to either of us. So what are you saying? I'm saying maybe we need to take a break. Give each other space to focus on what we need to do without the pressure of maintaining something long distance that's making us both miserable. The word should have hurt more, should have felt like a betrayal or an ending. Instead, they felt almost like relief, the kind that comes when you finally name a truth you've been avoiding. Is that what you want? Ethan asked. I don't know what I want anymore, Adrienne admitted. I just know I can't keep feeling like I'm failing at this every single day. And I think you feel the same way. She wasn't wrong. So we just, stop talking? Maybe we just stop trying so hard to be something we can't be right now. You focus on school and Maya. I focus on this project. And when I'm back in Boston, if I come back to Boston, we see where we are. That sounds like a breakup with extra steps. Adrienne laughed, but it was hollow. Maybe it is. I don't know. I just know I'm tired of feeling like I'm not enough from 3,000 miles away. Ethan understood. He was tired too. Tired of the distance, the disappointment, the constant negotiation of time zones and expectations. Tired of missing someone who felt more like a memory than a present reality. Okay, he said finally, if that's what you need. Is it what you need? He thought about it, really thought about it. Yeah, I think it might be. They talked for a few more minutes, their voices gentle and sad, trying to find a way to end things that didn't feel like they were destroying what they'd built. Finally, Adrienne said she had a meeting and needed to go. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too." "And Ethan? I don't regret any of it, even the hard parts." "Me neither." After they hung up, Ethan sat in his car and watched students crossing the parking lot, backpacks slung over shoulders, conversations floating through the spring air. He felt emptied out, scraped clean, but also strangely unburdened. The relationship had become a weight neither of them knew how to carry anymore. Maybe letting it go was the kindest thing they could do for each other. He texted Maya's school to let them know he'd be a few minutes late for pickup. Then he sat in the silence and let himself grieve the loss of something that had mattered more than almost anything else in his life. But grief, Ethan was learning, didn't have to mean giving up. It just meant acknowledging that some chapters end so new ones can begin. He started the car and drove to pick up his daughter, ready to keep moving forward even when the path ahead looked nothing like he'd imagined. The weeks after the call settled into Ethan's life like sediment, heavy and inevitable. He deleted Adrienne's contact from his favorites list, but couldn't bring himself to delete it entirely. Her number sat buried in his phone like evidence of something that had mattered, proof that he'd been loved by someone who saw him clearly and chose him anyway. He told Maya they were taking a break, and she'd nodded with the solemn understanding of a child who'd learned too young that adults didn't always keep their promises. "Is it because of me?" Maya asked quietly that night. "What?" "No, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you. But if you didn't have to take care of me, you could have gone to San Francisco with her." Ethan pulled his daughter into his arms, his heart breaking at the logic she'd constructed. "Listen to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Nothing about this is your fault. Adrienne and I we wanted different things right now. That's all." "Do you still love her?" The question caught in his throat. "Yeah, I do." "Then why aren't you fighting for her?" Because sometimes fighting meant knowing when to let go, Ethan thought. Because sometimes love wasn't enough to bridge the distance between two people's dreams. But he couldn't say that to an 8-year-old who still believed in happy endings. "It's complicated," he said instead, hating how inadequate the words sounded. Maya pulled back and looked at him with eyes too wise for her age. Adults always say that when they don't want to explain. She wasn't wrong. Spring semester intensified into a brutal rhythm of early mornings and late nights. Ethan's clinical rotations expanded to include emergency medicine and urgent care, throwing him into situations that required quick thinking and steady hands. He sutured lacerations, stabilized trauma patients, delivered difficult diagnoses to people whose worlds were about to change. The work was exhausting and occasionally terrifying, but it was also the most alive he'd felt in years. His supervising physician in the ER, Dr. Martinez, was a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of calm competence that made even chaos feel manageable. She watched Ethan work with a critical eye, correcting his technique, pushing him to think 3 steps ahead, never accepting good enough when excellent was possible. "You're hesitating," she told him one night after a particularly difficult shift. They'd lost a patient, a teenager who'd overdosed, whose heart had stopped despite everything they'd tried. Ethan had performed CPR until his arms shook, pumped epinephrine, and shocked the flatlined heart over and over, and still the kid had slipped away. "I'm not hesitating," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "You are. You second-guess yourself. You look for permission when you should be acting." Dr. Martinez leaned against the nurse's station, her scrub still spotted with the teenager's blood. "You know what to do. You have the knowledge, but you don't trust it yet." "What if I'm wrong?" "Then you learn and you do better next time. But if you don't act at all, the outcome is guaranteed." She studied him. "What happened before you came here? What made you so afraid of making mistakes?" Ethan thought about his wife, about the months of watching her fade despite every medical intervention, every hope pinned on treatments that ultimately failed. He thought about the guilt that still lived in his chest, the irrational belief that maybe if he'd pushed harder, researched more, demanded different care, she'd still be here. "I lost someone," he said quietly. "Someone I couldn't save." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. "We all lose people we can't save. That's the job. But you can't practice medicine like you're trying to atone for something that was never your fault to begin with." The words landed hard. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, some locked place beginning to open. How do you live with it? He asked. The losses? I remember why I'm here. Every patient I help is a reason to keep showing up. She pushed off the counter. You're good at this, Walker. Better than you know, but you need to start believing that. That night, Ethan drove home in silence, thinking about belief and trust and the ways people carried their grief into every room they entered. He thought about Adrienne, about the way she'd believed in him before he believed in himself. He wondered if she was awake in San Francisco, if she ever thought about him, if letting each other go had been the right choice or just the easier one. His phone buzzed at a red light, a text from an unknown number. Hi, Ethan. This is Sandra from the hospital. A few of us are getting together for drinks Friday if you want to join. Nothing fancy, just unwinding after a long week. Sandra, the nurse who'd encouraged him to apply to PA school, who always saved him the good coffee, who treated him like a colleague even when he was just a transporter pushing beds through hallways. He hadn't talked to her much since starting the program. His schedule barely overlapped with his old shifts anymore. He typed back, Thanks, I'll try to make it. Friday came and Ethan almost didn't go. He was tired, behind on studying for his upcoming pathophysiology exam, and social situations felt like work when all he wanted was sleep. But Maya had a sleepover at Emma's house, and the prospect of sitting alone in his empty apartment felt worse than forcing himself to be around people. The bar was a dive near the hospital, the kind of place where medical staff gathered to complain about administrators and difficult patients over cheap beer. Ethan found Sandra at a corner table with 3 other nurses he recognized, Tom, Rachel, and Jennifer. You made it. Sandra waved him over. Guys, this is Ethan. Used to work transport. Now he's in the PA program at Northeastern. Living the dream, Tom said, raising his beer in salute. More like living the nightmare, Ethan replied, sliding into the booth. They laughed, and the conversation flowed easily. Hospital gossip, horror stories from recent shifts, gallows humor about the dysfunctional computer system that had crashed twice that week. Ethan found himself relaxing, the tension in his shoulders loosening as he remembered what it felt like to be around people who understood the particular exhaustion of healthcare work. So what made you go back to school? Jennifer asked. I mean, the PA route is brutal. Most people don't sign up for that kind of pain voluntarily. Ethan considered the question. I wanted to do more than just move patients from point A to point B. I wanted to actually help them. You helped plenty as a transporter, Sandra said. I saw how you were with people. You remembered names, asked about their families. That matters. Maybe, but I wanted to be able to change outcomes, not just witness them. Rachel nodded. I get that. It's why I went into nursing instead of becoming a CNA. Same impulse. How are you managing the workload? Tom asked. I had a buddy who tried the PA program while working and he flamed out after 1 semester. Barely, Ethan admitted. I cut my hours at the hospital to part-time. I don't sleep much, and my kid has learned to be way more independent than any 8-year-old should have to be. Single parent? Jennifer asked. Yeah, my wife died a few years ago. The table went quiet, the easy atmosphere shifting into something more somber. I'm sorry, Rachel said softly. It's okay. We're managing. Ethan took a long drink of his beer, some days better than others. Sandra caught his eye, her expression knowing. What about that woman you were seeing, the one you brought to the hospital fundraiser last fall? Ethan's chest tightened. That didn't work out. What happened? She took a job in San Francisco. Long distance fell apart. That's rough, Tom said. Those almost never survive. Yeah, well, Ethan shrugged, trying to appear casual. It is what it is. But Sandra was still watching him with that particular intensity nurses developed, the kind that saw through deflection and denial. Do you regret it? Letting her go? Did he? Ethan turned the question over in his mind, examining it from different angles. I don't know. Maybe I regret how it ended, but I don't know if I regret the choice. She needed to focus on her career. I needed to focus on school and Maya. Sometimes things just don't line up. Or sometimes people don't fight hard enough, Sandra said gently. Not saying that's what happened with you two, just saying sometimes we convince ourselves that letting go is noble when really it's just fear. The observation stung because it felt true. Ethan had told himself he was being selfless, giving Adrian space to succeed without the burden of his needs. Onto safer topics, and Ethan let himself onto safer topics, and Ethan let himself get caught up in the rhythm of it, the laughter, the shared understanding, the sense of belonging to something larger than his own struggle. When the evening ended and everyone scattered to their cars, Sandra walked with him to the parking lot. "Can I give you some advice?" she asked. "Do I have a choice?" She smiled. "Not really. Here it is. Stop punishing yourself for wanting things. You're allowed to have a career and a relationship and a life that feels like more than just survival. You don't have to choose one or the other." "It doesn't feel that simple." "It's not simple, but it's true." She squeezed his shoulder. "You're doing great, Ethan. Better than you think. Don't forget that." He drove home thinking about her words, about the way he'd spent the last few years constructing a life so narrow there was barely room for anything beyond work and Maya. Adrian had been the first person to challenge that, to suggest he deserved more. And he'd let her walk away rather than figure out how to make room for both his dreams and hers. The realization sat heavy in his chest as he climbed the stairs to his empty apartment. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made Boston feel like a different city entirely. Ethan's program moved into its clinical intensive phase. Full days at various practice sites, seeing patients under supervision, building the muscle memory of diagnosis and treatment. He rotated through family medicine, pediatrics, and internal medicine, each rotation teaching him new ways to listen, to observe, to translate symptoms into understanding. In July, he had a patient, a woman in her early 40s, who came in complaining of fatigue and weight loss. Her primary care doctor had run basic labs and found nothing alarming, but something about her story nagged at Ethan. The fatigue had started gradually 6 months ago. The weight loss was unintentional. She'd been chalking it up to stress from her job. "Have you noticed any other changes?" Ethan asked, scrolling through her chart. "Night sweats? Fever? Swollen lymph nodes?" "Maybe some night sweats," the woman said. "But I thought that was just menopause starting." Something clicked in Ethan's mind. He performed a thorough physical exam and found what he was looking for: slightly enlarged lymph nodes in her neck and under her arms, easy to miss if you weren't specifically checking. He discussed the findings with his supervising physician, Dr. Patel, who ordered additional testing. 3 days later, the results came back. Lymphoma, early stage, highly treatable with the right intervention. "You caught this," Dr. Patel told Ethan as they reviewed the labs. "The primary care doc missed it because he wasn't thinking broadly enough, but you listened to the whole picture and connected the dots." "I just asked questions." "Exactly, that's the job." Dr. Patel looked at him seriously. "You saved that woman months of misdiagnosis and deterioration. You know that, right?" Ethan felt the weight of it settle over him, not the burden of responsibility, but the profound satisfaction of having made a difference. This was why he'd come back. This moment, this ability to see what others missed and change someone's trajectory. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me. You did the work." That evening, Ethan picked up Maya from summer camp and took her out for ice cream. They sat on a bench in the common, watching tourists and college students drift past, the city humming with summer energy. "You seem happy," Maya observed, chocolate ice cream dripping down her cone. "I had a good day at work." "What happened?" Ethan thought about how to explain it in terms an 8-year-old would understand. "I helped figure out why someone was sick, and now the doctors can help her get better." "Like a detective?" "Kind of, yeah, a medical detective." Maya grinned. "That's cool. Is that what you're going to do when you're done with school?" "That's the plan." "I'm proud of you, Dad." The words hit him square in the chest. "Thanks, sweetheart. That means a lot." "Do you think Adrienne would be proud too?" Ethan's breath caught. They hadn't talked about Adrienne in months. "Yeah, I think she would." "Do you miss her?" "Sometimes." "Me too." Maya was quiet for a moment, then added, "Emma says when people really love each other, they find a way back. Do you think that's true?" "I don't know, baby. Sometimes people love each other and still can't make it work." "That's sad." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "It really is." August brought the news that Ethan had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. He received an email from the program director asking him to schedule a meeting. His stomach dropped as he read it. Meetings like this were never casual. Either he was failing out or something had gone terribly wrong. He showed up to Dr. Brennan's office the next day, palms sweating, mentally preparing for the worst. "Sit down, Ethan," Dr. Brennan said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. She was a tall woman with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. "How do you think you're doing in the program?" "Honestly, I'm not sure." Ethan tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm passing everything, but I know I'm not at the top of my class." "No, you're not at the top. You're solidly middle of the pack academically." She pulled up something on her computer screen. "But your clinical evaluations tell a different story. Every single supervisor you've worked with this year has commented on your patient interaction skills, your diagnostic thinking, and your work ethic. Dr. Martinez in the ER specifically noted that you're one of the most naturally talented students she's worked with in terms of bedside manner and clinical intuition." Ethan blinked. "She said that?" "She did." Dr. Patel echoed the same sentiment. So did Dr. Reeves. Dr. Brennan leaned back in her chair. "Here's what I'm seeing. You're a non-traditional student who's working twice as hard as everyone else to balance school with single parenthood. Your test scores are decent, but not exceptional because you don't have the luxury of studying 12 hours a day like some of your classmates. But when you're actually working with patients, you shine. You have the instincts and the compassion that can't be taught." "I'm not sure I understand why you're telling me this." "Because I'm recommending you for early placement in our community health track. It's a program we offer to students who show exceptional promise in underserved care settings. You'd finish your didactic work as planned, but your clinical rotations would focus specifically on family medicine in low-income communities. After graduation, you'd be committed to working in a community health center for at least 2 years. Ethan's mind raced. What does that mean practically? It means a guaranteed job after graduation at one of our partner clinics. It means loan forgiveness for a significant portion of your student debt. And it means you'd be doing the kind of work you're clearly suited for, caring for people who need advocates in the healthcare system. Why me? Because your life experience makes you uniquely qualified to understand the patients you'd be serving. You know what it's like to struggle financially, to navigate systems that aren't designed for people like you. That empathy, combined with your clinical skills, makes you exactly what these communities need. Dr. Brennan smiled. So what do you think? Ethan thought about the patients he'd seen over the last year, the single mothers bringing in kids with chronic conditions they couldn't afford to treat properly, the elderly patients stretching medication to make it last because they couldn't afford refills, the working poor who delayed care until emergencies because they had no insurance. He thought about being on the other side of that divide, being the person who could actually help instead of just witnessing the system fail over and over. I think yes, he said. Absolutely yes. Dr. Brennan's smile widened. Good. I'll get the paperwork started. Welcome to the community health track. Ethan walked out of that meeting feeling like he'd been handed a future he'd barely dared to imagine. A guaranteed job, loan forgiveness, work that aligned with every value he'd been trying to uphold while clawing his way through this program. It felt almost too good to be true. That night, he wanted desperately to call Adrienne, to tell her about the meeting, to hear her voice light up with pride and certainty that he could do this. But they hadn't spoken in 5 months. She'd sent a brief text on Maya's birthday in June, "Tell Maya happy birthday from me." But nothing since. For all Ethan knew, she'd moved on completely, was dating someone in San Francisco, had built a life that had no room for the complicated single father she'd left behind in Boston. Instead, he called Sandra. "That's incredible," she said when he told her the news. "Ethan, do you realize what this means? You're going to be able to actually make a difference." "I hope so." "You will. I've seen how you are with patients. This is exactly what you should be doing." They talked for another hour, Sandra sharing stories from her own years working in community health, the challenges and rewards of caring for populations that mainstream medicine often overlooked. By the time they hung up, Ethan felt grounded again, connected to something larger than his own uncertainty. September arrived with the crispness of fall, and Ethan started his final year of the program. The community health track meant more time in clinics and less time in classrooms, which suited him perfectly. He worked at a health center in Dorchester, seeing patients who reminded him of himself, people working multiple jobs, juggling childcare and medical needs, trying to stay healthy with limited resources. He treated diabetics who couldn't afford their insulin, asthmatics whose apartments had mold but couldn't afford to move, kids with preventable dental issues because their parents couldn't take time off work for appointments. Every patient was a puzzle of medical needs and social determinants. And Ethan found himself thinking not just about prescriptions, but about resources, food banks, rental assistance programs, free childcare options. "You're a natural at this," his supervisor, Dr. Chen, told him one afternoon. She was a woman in her 60s who'd been working in community health for 40 years. "You see the whole person, not just the symptoms." "I've been that person," Ethan said simply. "I know what it's like to choose between paying rent and paying for medication." That perspective is invaluable. Don't lose it when you graduate and start making a decent salary. Ethan thought about that as he drove home that evening. The idea that he'd soon be making enough money to stop worrying about late rent payments and overdrawn bank accounts still felt surreal. He'd spent so many years in survival mode that the prospect of stability seemed almost frightening. October brought an unexpected email. The subject line simply read, "Thinking of you." Ethan's heart stuttered when he saw Adrian's name. He stared at the message for a full minute before opening it. "Hi, Ethan. I know it's been a while and I don't know if you even want to hear from me, but I was in a meeting today and someone mentioned Boston. And I thought about you. About Maya. About the night we met and how you changed my whole trajectory without even knowing it. I hope you're doing well. I hope school is everything you wanted it to be. I hope you're happy. I miss you. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that anymore, but it's true. Take care of yourself. A." Ethan read the email 5 times, each word settling into him like stones. She missed him. After everything. After the distance and the silence and the decision to let go, she still thought about him. He started typing a response 3 different times and deleted each one. What was there to say? That he missed her too? That he thought about her every time he hit a milestone she wasn't there to celebrate? That part of him had been waiting for 5 months to hear from her? Finally, he wrote, "Hi, Adrian. It's good to hear from you. School is hard but good. I'm in a community health track now, working with underserved populations. It feels right. Maya asks about you sometimes. She misses you too. I'm glad you're doing well out there. Take care." E. He hit send before he could overthink it. 3 hours later, her response came. "Community health is perfect for you. I'm proud of you. Tell Maya I miss her." They didn't say anything about the months of silence, about the relationship that had unraveled, about whether there was any path forward. But the exchange felt like a door opening slightly, letting in the smallest sliver of light. Over the next few weeks, they exchanged occasional messages. Nothing deep, nothing that crossed into territory they weren't ready to navigate. But the communication was there, tentative and careful, like 2 people learning to be friends after being something more. In November, Adrian sent a photo of the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset. Still beautiful, but it doesn't feel like home. Ethan sent back a picture of Boston Common covered in fallen leaves. Still here, still home. He didn't know what any of it meant, didn't know if they were building towards something or just maintaining connection for connection's sake. But for now, it was enough. His program accelerated toward graduation. Final exams, practical assessments, the mounting pressure of proving he'd learned enough to be trusted with people's lives. Ethan studied with an intensity that bordered on obsession, determined not to stumble at the finish line. In early December, he received confirmation that he'd passed his final exams. His GPA was solid, not valedictorian material, but respectable. More importantly, his clinical evaluations were exceptional. Every supervisor praised his patient care, his diagnostic skills, his ability to build trust with communities that had every reason to distrust the healthcare system. He was going to graduate. He was going to be a PA. The dream he'd abandoned 3 years ago was finally, impossibly, coming true. Maya threw her arms around him when he told her, "I knew you could do it. Thanks for believing in me, sweetheart. Are you going to tell Adrian?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know. Maybe." "You should. She'd want to know." That night after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat at his kitchen table and composed a message. "I'm graduating in May. Community Health Center of Dorchester offered me a position starting in June. Loan forgiveness, decent salary, work that matters. I couldn't have done any of this without you believing in me first. Thank you. Adrienne's response came immediately, like she'd been waiting. Ethan, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you I could cry. You deserve all of this and more. Then, after a pause, another message. My contract ends in March. I'm coming home. Ethan stared at the words, his heart pounding. Home. She was coming home. He typed, to Boston? Where else would I go? The words glowed on Ethan's phone screen like a promise he wasn't sure he could trust. Where else would I go? He read them again, his thumb hovering over the keyboard, a dozen responses forming and dissolving in his mind. Part of him wanted to ask what it meant, if she was coming back for a job, for closure, or for him. But another part, the part that had learned to protect himself from hope, hesitated to assume anything at all. Finally, he typed, when? End of March. Contract wraps up and I told them I'm not renewing. I need to come home, Ethan. I've been gone long enough. He stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. March was 4 months away. 4 months of not knowing what would happen when she returned, of living in the suspended space between what they'd been and what they might become. Let me know when you're back. We should talk. Yeah, we should. The conversation ended there, but Ethan sat at his kitchen table for another hour, turning the exchange over in his mind. She was coming home. The woman who'd seen him at his lowest point and pulled him into something better was coming back to Boston. He didn't know if that changed anything between them, didn't know if the distance and silence had damaged something beyond repair. But for the first time in months, the future felt less like a straight line and more like a question mark waiting to be answered. December slid into January, and Ethan's final semester began with the strange sensation of an ending approaching. His clinical rotations continued at the Dorchester Health Center, where he'd become a familiar presence to the staff and patients. People greeted him by name now, asked about Maya, trusted him with their stories and their struggles. It was the kind of medicine he'd always imagined, personal, connected, rooted in community rather than transactions. One afternoon in late January, he was seeing a patient named Marcus, a 47-year-old construction worker who'd come in complaining of persistent back pain. The x-rays showed nothing alarming, but something about Marcus's presentation bothered Ethan. The way he winced when sitting down, the slight limp he tried to hide, the exhaustion etched into his face. How long have you been working through this pain? Ethan asked. Marcus shrugged. Couple months. I can't afford to take time off. Got 3 kids and my wife's hours got cut at her job. What about workers' comp? Boss says it wasn't a workplace injury, so no coverage, and I can't push it or I'll lose the job entirely. Marcus met Ethan's eyes. I just need something for the pain so I can keep working. Ethan had heard this story before, had lived a version of it himself. The impossible choice between health and survival, between taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. He could write a prescription for pain medication and send Marcus on his way. Or he could dig deeper. Let me do a more thorough exam, Ethan said, and we're going to run some additional tests. I don't think this is just muscular. 20 minutes later, he'd found what he was looking for. Signs of spinal stenosis, a narrowing of the spinal canal that was compressing nerves and causing Marcus's symptoms. Left untreated, it would only get worse. But with the right intervention, physical therapy, possibly surgery, Marcus could get his life back. This is treatable, Ethan explained, pulling up images on the computer. But you're going to need to stop working for a few weeks while we address it. Marcus's face fell. I can't afford that. I know, but I'm going to connect you with our social worker. We have programs that can help with temporary disability payments, food assistance, maybe even rent support while you're recovering. You don't have to choose between your health and feeding your kids. Marcus's eyes filled. Doctors just tell me what's wrong and send me away. Nobody's ever actually helped figure out how to fix it. That's what we're here for, Ethan said simply. The whole person, not just the symptoms. After Marcus left, Dr. Chen found Ethan in the break room. I saw what you did in there, the way you approached the social determinants alongside the medical diagnosis. It's the only way that makes sense to me. It's the right way, Dr. Chen said, and it's exactly why we offered you the job. You're going to do important work here, Ethan. The validation settled into him like warmth. This was where he belonged, not in a prestigious hospital system treating wealthy patients with excellent insurance, but here in the trenches, working with people who reminded him of himself, People who deserved advocates in a system designed to exclude them. That night, he texted Adrienne. Had a good day at work. Starting to feel like I know what I'm doing. Her response came quickly. You always knew what you were doing, you just needed to believe it. They'd been texting more frequently since her announcement about coming home. Nothing heavy, just small updates about their days. Photos of things that made them think of each other. Adrienne sent pictures of San Francisco sunsets and new restaurants she'd tried. Ethan sent photos of Maya's science fair project, a model of the ocean floor complete with handmade jellyfish, and particularly ridiculous Boston weather. The communication felt safe, friendly, like they were rebuilding foundation before attempting anything more. Ethan didn't push for clarification about what her return meant. Adrienne didn't ask about whether he'd be willing to try again. They existed in a careful present tense, acknowledging the past without trying to define the future. February brought Ethan's final clinical evaluations and the mounting pressure of proving he was ready to practice independently. His supervisors put him through rigorous assessments, complex patient cases, emergency scenarios, diagnostic challenges that tested everything he'd learned. He stumbled occasionally, second-guessed himself more than he should have, but he passed. Every single evaluation came back with the same message, ready for independent practice. Maya turned 9 that month, and Ethan threw her a party at the apartment with a dozen kids from school, an octopus-shaped cake he'd attempted to bake himself, and enough sugar to fuel a small army. He watched his daughter laugh with her friends, confident and happy despite all the upheaval of the last few years, and felt a pride so fierce it bordered on painful. You did good, Dad, Maya said that night as he tucked her in, her voice sleepy with contentment. You make it easy. Is Adrienne coming to my party next year? The question caught Ethan off guard. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. I hope so. I miss her. Yeah, Ethan said softly. Me too. In early March, Adrienne texted, I fly back on the 28th. Can we meet that weekend? Ethan's stomach flipped. Yeah. Just tell me when and where. That restaurant. Where we met. Saturday at 7? The symbolism wasn't lost on him. The place where everything had started, where a humiliating blind date had turned into the most important relationship of his life. The place where she'd seen him broken and decided he was worth her time anyway. I'll be there. The 2 weeks leading up to her return were excruciating. Ethan went through the motions of his final rotations, attended his last classes, completed his exit interviews with faculty. But his mind kept drifting to the upcoming meeting, to what he'd say, to whether the person who stepped off the plane would still be the woman he'd fallen in love with, or someone changed by a 1.5 years of distance. He told Maya that Adrienne was coming back, and his daughter's face lit up with an excitement that only increased his own anxiety. Are you going to ask her to be your girlfriend again? Maya asked. I don't know. We're just going to talk. But you still love her, right? Ethan couldn't lie to his daughter. Yeah, I do. Then tell her that. If only it were that simple. Graduation was scheduled for mid-May, but Ethan's program director called him in for a meeting the week before Adrienne's return. We've had a request from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Dr. Brennan said without preamble. They're looking for PAs to participate in a new initiative, mobile health clinics serving homeless populations and people living in underserved neighborhoods. It's grant-funded for the first 3 years, with potential for permanent positions if the program proves successful. They specifically asked if we had any graduating students who might be interested. And you thought of me? I thought of you immediately. The work would be challenging. You'd be seeing patients who often have complex medical and social needs, many of whom distrust the healthcare system entirely. But it would also be some of the most meaningful work you could do. Ethan's mind raced. What about my commitment to the Dorchester Health Center? I've already spoken with Dr. Chen. She thinks you'd be perfect for this. The mobile clinic would actually partner with the health center, so you'd still be part of that network. You'd just have a broader reach. When would it start? July. You'd have June to study for your boards and settle into the job at Dorchester, then transition into the mobile clinic role. It was exactly the kind of opportunity Ethan had dreamed about without knowing it existed. Medicine that went to people instead of waiting for them to navigate impossible systems. Care delivered with dignity to populations society too often ignored. I'm interested, he said. Absolutely interested. Dr. Brennan smiled, I hoped you'd say that. I'll send you the details. Ethan left that meeting feeling like puzzle pieces were clicking into place. His career trajectory was becoming clear. Not the prestigious hospital position some of his classmates were chasing, but something that felt authentic to who he was and what he valued. For the first time since starting this journey, he could see the shape of his future. He wanted to tell Adrienne immediately, but something held him back. He wanted to see her first, to understand where they stood before sharing the kind of news that felt like it should be celebrated together. The 28th arrived with unseasonably warm weather, spring arriving early and turning Boston into something magical. Ethan spent the day in a state of controlled anxiety, checking his phone obsessively, trying to focus on the pathophysiology textbook he needed to finish before graduation. Maya picked up on his nervous energy and wisely gave him space, occupying herself with homework and a new book about marine biology. At 6 o'clock, Ethan started getting ready. He put on the same shirt he'd worn to their first dinner, ironed this time, fitting better now that he'd lost the stress weight of early semesters. He stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized himself. He looked older, more settled, like someone who'd survived something difficult and come out stronger. "You look nice," Maya said from his bedroom doorway. "Thanks. Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "Why? You already know she likes you." "It's been a long time. People change." Maya crossed the room and hugged him. "Not the important stuff. The important stuff stays the same." Ethan held his daughter close, overwhelmed by her wisdom. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just finally noticed." He arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early and sat in his car, watching people come and go. Couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing, the ordinary magic of people living their lives. He thought about the last time he'd been here, 2 years ago, heartbroken and humiliated, convinced he'd never find connection again. He thought about the stranger who'd refused to let him leave defeated, who'd seen something in him worth investing in. At 7 o'clock exactly, he walked inside. Adrienne was already there, sitting at a table near the window, the same area where she'd been sitting that first night, watching him fall apart. She stood when she saw him, and Ethan's breath caught. She looked different. Her hair was longer, she'd lost some weight. There were new lines around her eyes that spoke of stress and long hours. But her smile was the same, bright and genuine and aimed directly at him. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure how to greet each other. Finally, Adrienne stepped forward and hugged him, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume and feeling something in his chest unlock. "I missed you," she said into his shoulder. "I missed you too." They sat down, and for a moment the awkwardness hung between them. Two people who'd once been so close now navigating the strange territory of almost strangers. "You look good," Adrienne said. "Different, but good." "Different how?" "More confident, like you finally believe in yourself." "I'm getting there." Ethan smiled. "You look different too. Tired, but in a good way, like you've been doing something important." "I have been, but I'm ready to be done with it." Their server appeared, a different person than that first night, but the menu was the same. They ordered without really looking at it, both too focused on each other to care about food. "So," Adrienne said once they were alone again, "tell me everything. How's school? How's Maya? How's life?" Ethan told her about the community health track, about his clinical rotations and the patients who'd taught him as much as his textbooks. He told her about the mobile clinic opportunity, about graduation in 6 weeks, about the impossible journey from that first humiliating night to this moment of actual achievement. "I can't believe you did it," Adrienne said, her eyes bright with emotion. "I knew you could, but seeing you actually here, about to graduate. I'm so proud of you, Ethan." "I couldn't have done it without you pushing me." "You would have found your way eventually." "Maybe, but you made me believe it was possible sooner." They talked through dinner about San Francisco, about the project she'd led, and the company she'd helped save. She told him about the loneliness of success, about hotel rooms and client dinners, and the hollow feeling of achievement without anyone to share it with. "I kept thinking about you," she admitted. "About Maya. About the life I'd walked away from to chase something that turned out to matter less than I thought it would." "Did you regret taking the job?" No, I needed to do it. I needed to prove to myself that I could. Adrienne looked down at her wine glass. But I regretted how we ended things. The way we just gave up instead of fighting for something worth keeping. Ethan's heart was pounding. I regretted that too. I told myself I was being selfless, giving you space to succeed. But really, I was just scared. Of what? Of asking you to choose me and having you realize I wasn't worth choosing. Adrienne reached across the table and took his hand. You were always worth choosing. I was just too caught up in my own ambitions to see what mattered most. So what now? Ethan asked quietly. Where do we go from here? I don't know. But I know I want to try again, if you do. The words hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. Ethan thought about the last 18 months, the distance, the silence, the nights he'd wanted to call her and hadn't. He thought about the person he'd become in that time, the ways he'd grown stronger by learning to stand on his own. He thought about Maya, about building a life that had room for both his dreams and the risk of letting someone in again. I want to try, he said, but I need to be honest with you about something. Okay? I can't go back to the way things were before. I can't be the person who needs you to believe in him because he can't believe in himself. I've worked too hard to build something solid to risk losing it by making you responsible for holding me up. Adrienne squeezed his hand. I don't want that either. I don't want to be your savior. I just want to be your partner. Then we have to do this differently. No more sacrificing everything for each other's careers. No more pretending distance doesn't matter. We have to build something that works for both of us, or we don't build it at all. Agreed. Adrienne smiled. So how do we do that? Ethan thought about it. We start slow. We rebuild what we had, but stronger this time. We make space for both our lives. My work, your work, Maya. We don't try to fix everything at once. We just show up and see what happens. I can do that. And we have to tell Maya what we're doing. She missed you almost as much as I did. I won't put her through another loss if this doesn't work out. It's going to work out, Adrienne said with quiet certainty, because this time we both know what we're fighting for. They finished dinner talking about logistics, Adrienne's apartment search, Ethan's upcoming board exams, Maya's summer plans. The conversation flowed easier now, the tension dissolving into something familiar and comfortable. By the time they paid the check, Adrienne insisting again, Ethan letting her without argument, it felt like they'd been doing this all along, like the 18 months had been a pause rather than an ending. Outside the restaurant, they stood on the sidewalk in the spring warmth, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Can I see you again before graduation? Ethan asked. How about tomorrow? I'd love to see Maya. She'd love that too. Adrienne leaned in and kissed him softly, and Ethan felt the last of his defenses crumble. This was real. This was happening. The woman he'd fallen in love with 2 years ago was back, and this time they were both ready. The next day, Adrienne came to the apartment bearing gifts, a new origami book for Maya, fancy coffee for Ethan, and a willingness to just exist in their space without expectation. Maya launched herself at Adrienne the moment she walked through the door, talking a mile a minute about school and science fair and her new obsession with cuttlefish. They can change colors and patterns on their skin, Maya explained, pulling Adrienne toward her room to show her videos. It's like they're speaking a visual language. Ethan watched them disappear down the hallway, heard Maya's excited chatter and Adrienne's genuine interest, and felt something settle in his chest. This could work. They could make this work. The weeks leading up to graduation were a blur of studying for board exams, final clinical hours, and slowly rebuilding what he and Adrienne had started. They went on actual dates, movies, walks along the Charles River, dinner at places that weren't quite as fancy as that first restaurant, but felt more authentically theirs. Adrienne found an apartment in Cambridge and started consulting part-time for a Boston firm, intentionally building a schedule that had room for life beyond work. Ethan studied obsessively for his boards while Adrienne quizzed him on medications and clinical guidelines. Maya absorbed it all with the adaptability of children, slowly letting Adrienne back into their daily routine. They had family dinners twice a week. Adrienne came to Maya's spring concert and soccer games. She helped with homework and listened to long explanations of marine biology facts. Is Adrienne going to live with us? Maya asked one night as Ethan tucked her in. Not right now. We're taking things slow. But eventually, maybe, if things keep going well. They will, Maya said with 9-year-old confidence. You guys are good together. Graduation day arrived in mid-May with the kind of perfect spring weather that felt like a reward for surviving Boston's brutal winter. Ethan put on his cap and gown, took photos with Maya and his neighbor Mrs. Chen, and tried not to think too hard about how surreal this moment was. 2 years ago, he'd been a hospital transporter with a GED and a dream he'd given up on. Now he was a physician assistant with a job offer and a future that felt limitless. The ceremony was long and formal, filled with speeches about excellence and service and the responsibility of healthcare providers. Ethan sat with his cohort, listening to names being called, watching his classmates walk across the stage. When they finally reached the W's, his heart started pounding. Ethan James Walker. He stood and walked to the stage, shook hands with the dean, accepted his diploma. In the audience, he could see Maya waving frantically, Adrienne beside her with tears streaming down her face. He smiled at them, this makeshift family that had carried him to this moment, and felt gratitude so overwhelming it almost knocked him sideways. After the ceremony, they found each other in the crowd. Maya threw her arms around him, and Adrienne joined the hug, the three of them standing together in a sea of graduates and families. I'm so proud of you, Adrienne said. So incredibly proud. We did it, Ethan said. All of us. They went out for celebration dinner, that same restaurant again, because it had become their place, the location that held the story of where they'd started and everything they'd survived. This time, Ethan ordered confidently, paid for the meal himself, and felt like a different person sitting across from Adrienne. Not different in the ways that mattered. He was still the single father who'd shown up here broken 2 years ago. But different in his certainty that he belonged in this life, at this table, with this woman and this future stretching ahead. I have something to tell you, Adrienne said over dessert. Ethan looked up. What? I got offered a partnership at the consulting firm. It would mean staying in Boston permanently, building a practice here instead of traveling constantly. That's incredible. Are you going to take it? I already did, she smiled, because I'm not going anywhere this time. I'm home. Ethan felt his throat tighten. You're sure? Completely. Everything I want is here. He reached across the table and took her hand. I love you. I should have said that more when we had the chance before. I love you too, and we have the chance now. June passed in a blur of studying for boards, which Ethan passed on his first attempt, and starting his position at the Community Health Center of Dorchester. The work was everything, Doctor. Chen had promised, challenging and meaningful and exhausting in the best way. Ethan saw patients who reminded him of himself, who struggled with the same impossible choices between health and survival, and he helped them navigate systems designed to exclude people like them. In July, he started with the Mobile Health Clinic program, spending 3 days a week in a converted van bringing medical care directly to homeless encampments and underserved neighborhoods. It was some of the hardest work he'd ever done, treating infected wounds in park bathrooms, managing chronic diseases in people who had no stable place to store medications, earning trust from populations who'd been failed by every system meant to help them. But it was also the most rewarding work imaginable. Every patient who accepted care, every person whose life improved even slightly because he'd shown up, it all mattered in ways his textbooks had never captured. Adrienne watched him come home exhausted and fulfilled, and she understood. She'd found her own version of that in her partnership, building a consulting practice focused on helping nonprofits and social enterprises instead of maximizing corporate profits. They were both doing work that aligned with their values, building careers that felt authentic rather than obligatory. Maya thrived with the stability of their new routine. She started 4th grade confident and happy, her marine biology obsession expanding to include environmental conservation. She talked about wanting to protect the oceans when she grew up, and both Ethan and Adrienne encouraged her with the certainty of people who'd learned that dreams deferred weren't dreams denied. By the time fall arrived, Adrienne had effectively moved into Ethan's apartment, though she kept her Cambridge place for the sake of pretense and slow progression. But most nights she was there, cooking dinner while Ethan helped Maya with homework, the three of them existing in a domestic harmony that felt both ordinary and miraculous. One Saturday in October, Adrian suggested they go back to the restaurant. Again? Ethan asked. We've been there like 6 times this year. I know, but I want to go one more time. There was something in her voice that made Ethan agree without argument. They dropped Maya at a friend's house for a sleepover and drove to the restaurant, the autumn air crisp and full of possibility. They were seated at the same table where they'd sat that very first night. Ethan looked around and saw the ghosts of who they'd been. The humiliated single father, the confident stranger who'd refused to let him leave defeated. He saw the fragile hope of that beginning and felt overwhelming gratitude for the courage it had taken to accept her invitation. Do you remember that night? Adrienne asked. Every detail. I knew the moment I saw you that you were going to change my life. I didn't know how, but I knew. I thought you were crazy for talking to me. Maybe I was. Adrienne smiled, but it was the best decision I ever made. They ordered dinner, fell into easy conversation about work and Maya and the small details of their intertwined lives. After dessert, Adrienne reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. Ethan's heart stopped. Adrienne, wait, let me say this first. She took a breath. 2 years ago, you walked into this restaurant with $50 and a broken heart. I walked in with a career I'd built and a life that looked successful but felt empty. We found each other in the middle of that, 2 people who needed something neither of us knew we were looking for. Adrienne, I'm not done. Her eyes were bright with tears. You taught me that success without connection is just noise. You taught me that showing up matters more than perfection. You taught me that love isn't about saving each other. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum band. Ethan Walker, will you marry me? The restaurant seemed to stop breathing. Ethan stared at the ring, at Adrienne's face, at the impossible, beautiful reality of this moment. Yes, he said, his voice breaking. Yes, absolutely yes. Adrienne slipped the ring on his finger, and they both started crying, laughing through tears, reaching for each other across the table. Around them, other diners started clapping, strangers celebrating a love story they knew nothing about, but recognized as something worth honoring. I can't believe you proposed to me, Ethan said when they'd composed themselves enough to speak. Someone had to. You would have taken another 6 months deliberating. That's fair. They sat there for a long time, holding hands across the table, watching the restaurant move around them. The place that had witnessed Ethan's worst moment had now witnessed one of his best. The symmetry felt almost too perfect, like a story someone had written rather than lived. But it was real. All of it was real. They drove home in comfortable silence, Ethan looking at the ring on his finger every few seconds like he needed to confirm it was actually there. When they got back to the apartment, they called Maya on video chat to tell her the news. Finally, Maya shrieked, does this mean Adrienne is going to be my stepmom? If that's okay with you, Adrienne said. Are you kidding? That's the best thing ever. They talked for another 20 minutes before Maya's friend's parents gently suggested she let them go. After hanging up, Ethan and Adrienne sat on the couch, exhausted and elated. We're really doing this, Ethan said. We really are. I don't have much to offer. A 1-bedroom apartment, student loan debt, a demanding job. Stop. Adrienne turned to face him. You have everything I want. A good heart, a beautiful daughter, a life built on values that actually matter. That's not nothing, Ethan. That's everything. He kissed her then, deep and certain, and felt the last piece of himself that had been holding back finally let go. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the same restaurant where everything had begun. The owner had been delighted to host, treating the space like it was the most natural venue in the world. Maya served as maid of honor, wearing a dress the color of the ocean and carrying a bouquet of sea-themed flowers. Ethan's colleagues from the health center came, along with Adrienne's business partners and the neighbors who'd helped him survive those early years of single parenthood. The ceremony was simple and genuine, filled with laughter and tears and the kind of joy that comes from people who'd earned their happiness through surviving everything that tried to break them. When Ethan slipped the ring on Adrienne's finger, a match to the one she'd given him, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. The humiliation, the hope, the distance, The reunion. Every hard moment that had felt unbearable at the time, but had somehow led to this. "I love you," he told her as they stood together. "I love you too. Forever." They kissed to applause, and Ethan felt complete in a way he'd forgotten was possible. The reception flowed into evening, full of dancing and toasts, and Maya teaching anyone who'd listen about the mating habits of seahorses. Ethan watched his daughter spin across the dance floor with Adrienne, both of them laughing, and felt gratitude so profound it bordered on painful. Later, as the party wound down and guests started leaving, Ethan found himself standing in the same spot where he'd sat 2 years earlier, humiliated and alone. He thought about the text message that had shattered him, about the stranger who'd refused to let that be his ending. "What are you thinking about?" Adrienne asked, coming to stand beside him. "That night, when you first saw me, I saw someone worth saving." "You saw someone worth knowing," Ethan corrected gently. "I didn't need savings. I needed someone to believe I was already enough." Adrienne leaned her head on his shoulder. "You were always enough. You just needed to see it." They stood there together, married now, looking at the space where their story had started and feeling the weight of everything they'd built. A year later, they'd launch a nonprofit together, a program providing healthcare navigation and financial support for single parents trying to pursue education while raising children. It would be funded by Adrienne's business success and driven by Ethan's lived experience, a collaboration that helped hundreds of families navigate the impossible systems they'd both learned to survive. But that night, at their wedding, they simply existed in the present. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of separate struggles and built something stronger than either could have managed alone. Maya ran over, breathless from dancing. "Can we do cake now?" "Yeah, sweetheart," Ethan said, pulling his daughter into a hug. "We can do cake." The three of them walked to the table together, father, daughter, and the woman who'd become family, not through biology, but through choice. They cut the cake, surrounded by people who loved them, celebrated a beginning that had emerged from an ending, and proved that sometimes the worst nights of a person's life can become doorways to everything they never knew they deserved. Ethan looked at Adrienne across the candlelight, at Maya laughing with their friends, at the life they'd built from $50 and a fragile hope. He thought about the man who'd walked into this restaurant 2 years ago, convinced he was unworthy of love, and he wished he could tell that version of himself what was waiting on the other side of shame. That showing up matters more than arriving perfect. That the people who see you at your lowest and choose you anyway are worth fighting for. The dreams deferred aren't dreams denied. Sometimes they're just dreams waiting for the right moment to come true. He raised his glass for the final toast of the evening, surrounded by everyone who mattered, and spoke the truth he'd learned through surviving. To second chances, to people who refuse to let us give up on ourselves, and to building lives that feel like home. The restaurant erupted in cheers, and Ethan felt the story of who he'd been transformed completely into the story of who he'd become. Not because someone had saved him, but because someone had seen him clearly and decided he was worth the investment, and that he'd learned made all the difference.